Alright, so in this screencast, we are going to convert this search bar into a React component. Right now, I'm using AngularJS to do and using two-way binding. So if I type Rails, it's getting the data from the server and it's rendering this dropdown. If I inspect this element, you can see that it's ng repeating these elements. Alright, so we're going to convert this into a React component. I'm going to open up the text editor and let's go to rubygems.org. Search for React Rails, and this is the gem we're going to be using. Let's copy this to the clipboard. Let's go to the home page, and this is how you install the gem. So let's go to the text editor, open up gem file, and I'm going to delete CoffeeScript because I'm not going to be using CoffeeScript, and I'll add the gem right here. Okay, so let's go back to the terminal and run bundle install. Alright, so let's go back to the documentation and you can run this generator. Alright, so let's run that. It created this components folder for us and it added some lines to our application.js. So let's go back to the application.js, app assets, JavaScript, application.js, and I'm currently using Angular, so I'll delete that. And this app.js is my Angular configuration to show you what it looks like. It is just the Angular module, so I'm going to delete that. Okay, so let me just delete those files: app assets, JavaScript, app.js, and vendor assets, JavaScript, AngularJS. Alright, and the gem added these three lines. It added this React and ReactJS, and then components. This is another manifest file. If you look at the file, it's another require statement, and it's requiring all the components in this file, and that's going to get included in this application.js. Alright, so let's go back to the documentation. And I think you don't have to add this because this is the defaults, but I'm just going to add this just in case. And if I want to configure the React later on, I have a place to do that. So let's go to config environments development.rb, and I'm just going to add that at the bottom. React configuration. And if you're pushing that to production, don't forget to add this one as well. Alright. And we're going to be using Babel to transpile our JavaScript. And we're going to be using ES6, ES 2015 syntax. Alright, so let's go scroll down to the bottom of the page, and we're going to generate our component. So let's run this. And it says you can add this --ES6 to create ES6 file. Alright, so let's go back to the terminal, and then I'm just going to scroll this down. Alright, let's run Rails generate React component and search bar, and I'll give --ES6. If you're not familiar with ES6, I recommend going to code school and then take the JavaScript ES 2015 course, It's really good. So I'm gonna run this. Alright, so he created this JSX file for us. So let's go to the terminal. Let's go back to the text editor and open up the file. Under components, search bar.es6.jsx. Okay, just to test if this is working, I'm just gonna say search bar. Alright, so if you go back to the documentation of the gem, you can actually pre-render your component on the server. And this is how you do it. So this is the helper signature. So let's include that in our header. So I have that header partial file. So I'm going to open up header.html.erb, and this is the search bar and then the dropdown that I'm currently using. So I'll create another one right before that. And I already gave the styles to the elements, so I'm going to include the same CSS class. And I'm not going to include this ng controller because you're using React instead of Angular. So let's do React component, and you include the string. The first argument is the string of the component. So that's search bar. And if you go back, we're going to pass some properties, and HTML options. So currently we don't need any properties, so blank object. And we're going to add pre-render true. Close the ERB tag, and let's go back to our and you probably want to restart your server, so I'm going to do that right now. Server, let's open that in the browser. Okay, I forgot to add closing parentheses. Okay, let's go back to the browser, and you can see your first React element here. And just ignore this for now. This is the Angular template, and it's not getting data, so you're gonna see this double curlies. Alright, so let's go back and just think about how we're gonna structure this component. So we have this search bar. We just created the search bar component, and we're gonna have this drop down. And if you, as you can see, if you type something here, I want that text to appear in the one of the elements on this drop down as well. So I'm going to create search container component and then nest this search bar and then a drop down inside that container. So let's create that component. I'm going to run generator component search container and then give ES6 option. Alright, so let's go back. Let's open that file. Search container JSX, and one of the nice thing that this gem provides us is that we don't have to require other JSX files. So we can just say div, and then we can just instantiate that search bar component here. And let's add from search container. And you might have to restart your server. So if you refresh the page, let's see. Alright, because we didn't change the React component in our header. So let's go back. And then instead of saying search bar, I'm going to change this to search container. If we refresh the page, you can see that from search container and then the search bar is included. Alright, that's cool. So let's create this search bar. So I'm just going to take a look at this, inspect this, and then you can see that this Rails template has generated this form for us. So I'm gonna basically copy all the HTML in our component. So let's go back. So in our app assets, JavaScript components, search bar .jsx. So just get rid of this, and I want to paste in some HTML so that you don't have to watch me type all the HTML tags. Just added some HTML. Basically, I just copied it from this console from the browser. So I'll just explain what I did. So this is just the form, and this input and hidden input is generated by Rails form 4 helper. So I just added that, and a few things. This looks like an HTML tags, but actually it's a JSX, and you have to modify some of the HTML properties. So the one thing I noticed was this accept char set. You have to use this camel case, and instead of CSS class, because of the name conflict, you have to use class name for CSS classes. Alright, so if you go back to the browser and refresh the page, I can see the same search input here, and this is fully functional. If I type in Rails and it searches. Alright, so let's go back to the container, and then I'm going to delete this text. Container. Alright, so let's delete that. Refresh the page. Alright, so the next step would be to add a dropdown. So let's create that component. I'm going to call it search results list. Okay, so let's go back to terminal and run that generator. Search result list and ES6. Alright. I recommend you restart the server because it was giving me some error. Okay, let's open that file. Alright, so in here, instead of this div, I'll create unordered list. And let's see what it looks like in our browser. Just inspect the element. And I can see that it's the class of drop-down menu and autocomplete items. So let's add those. So this is just a bootstrap class, and this is the ID that I gave to do some styling and some JavaScript stuff. Alright, so let's just add some text here. Search result list. And let's include that in our search container component. So here, inside of this div, add search results list, and it's a self-closing tag. Let's refresh the page. and you can see there's a search result. Okay. Alright, so the next step would be to create the list item. So let's create those with the generator. I'm going to call the first one search post list item ES6, and the second one search user list item. Alright, let's restart the server. I'm going to open up assets, JavaScript components, search post list item.jsx, and I'm going to change this div to an li with search post list item. And I'm going to open up assets, JavaScript components, search user list item.jsx, and this one I'll just say search user list item. Okay, so let's go back to the search results list component. So instead of this hard-coded li, I'll change it to search post list item, and another one search user list item. Let's open that in the browser, and you can see the list item here. Alright, so I'm going to add these to our dropdown. So if I go to my header, template, I can see that I have this li and other li elements inside this ul. So I'm just going to copy this and go back to the result list, and I'll change and then paste that in. So these are some Angular code, so I'll change some of this. I'll just delete this href for now, and these doubled curlies, I'll delete that, and I'll delete this ng show, and ng repeat. So instead of this, I'll render search post list item, and I'll delete the ng show. Alright, ng repeat. Instead of this tag, I'll render search user list item. Alright, so let's change these class to class name. I'm going to use vims search and find and replace. Alright, so let's save this and then go back to the browser, and you can see that it has the same format. Alright, so this is everything. All of this is hard-coded right now, so we have to add some JavaScript functionality to this. And we're going to start, because React is one-way data binding, the data flows in one direction, so we're going to start from the top. So let's go to the most parent component, search container, I'm sorry. And we're gonna add constructor. This is like Ruby's initialize method. So if your background is Ruby, so constructor is gonna take props, and you're gonna call, because it's inheriting from React component, you're gonna call super and pass in that props. And we can create some state. And I think this component needs to know about the term, search term, and it initialize it to empty string, and then has post array, empty array, and then users. This one is an empty array as well. Alright, so this is initializing the state. And you can access these by just saying this.state.term, for example. Alright, so let's pass this state term to the search bar because it has to know the term. So let's say term, and then you use this curly braces in JSX .state.term, and this is gonna get passed to the search bar component. So let's open up that file. So it's available in this search bar component. So this is the search text input. So let me just reformat this. Alright, so, and we have to keep track of the term. So we'll add the value. It's going to be this.props.term. So this is going to get passed to this term. I'm going to add another property. I'm going to pass another property to this search bar component. So let's reformat this real quick. I'm going to call this onSearch term change, and this is going to be a function. So I'll use ES6 syntax. So when term is changed, this function is going to get called with term. I'm going to create this search method inside this class. So I'm going to call it this.search.term, and I'll set the state there. So let's do that here. Search. I'll set the state, set state. This method is available because we're inheriting from React component, and I'll use term, and we're gonna fire off the AJAX to the server. I'll use jQuery for doing that. And I know that I have to point that to URL autocomplete JSON term. Let me just use string template string for ES6 autocomplete JSON / term. Actually, it's Q, and then I'll interpolate this string term and backtick. Alright, and the method is get and success. We're gonna get data, and let's just console log that for now. So I'm using this autocomplete.json URL because that's how I set up my server. So if I go to localhost autocomplete.json.term rails, it's going to give me back this JSON data. Actually, I noticed that it's term instead of queue, so let me just change that. Okay, and actually in ES6 you can delete this if you're using the same name for your variable and the key. You can just use this shorthand. Alright, so hopefully when we so we have to use this onSearchTermChange property that's passed to this search bar component. So we can say onChange. So every time user inputs some text into the search field, we're gonna fire off this function. So this event handler is gonna get event object, and we're gonna call this props on search term change, and it's expecting the search term. So I'll say event target and value. Alright, close this and close that. Alright, so let's go back to the browser. And open up the console and let's search something. Rails. Okay, so it's saying it's getting autocomplete. Okay, I have a typo there. Let me change this. Autocomplete. Alright, let's try that again. And Rails. And great, so we're getting data from the server. Alright. And I just noticed that this autocomplete is not turned off because I have a typo here. Autocomplete. Alright, so let's go to list component. And I'm gonna use that term so that the term's gonna appear right here. So let's do that. So I'll pass this term to this component, this.state.term, and okay, let me just reformat this real quick. Alright, so let's go to this strong tag, and inside that I'll add this props term. Let's check that in the browser. Alright, so you see the text appear here. So if I search for food, you can see that it's appearing up here. Cool. So the next one would be this. Every time a user type in something, we have to set the posts and users array to the data we got from the server. So let's do that right here. It's this.setState. So posts would be data.posts, and user would be data users. If I check the response that I get from the server, I have this posts array and then users, and I'm setting that to the state right here. Alright, I'm just going to add this console.log so we can see the data we are getting from the server. Alright, so now that we have our posts and users data stored in this state, I'm going to pass that to the list. So I'll say posts is this dot state dot posts, and users is this dot state dot users, and we have access to that array in the components. Okay, so let's go back to the results list, and we're gonna iterate over this array and then create search post list item. So let's do that. So instead of this, I'll change that to this dot render post, and we're gonna create that method in this class. And I'll change this to this dot render users. Okay, so below this render method, I'll create render post. Okay, so this is going to return the array of the search post list item component. So it's going to return this dot props posts, and then we're going to map, and then this is going to take a function and it's going to return search post list item, and it's going to pass this post down to this component. Let's do the same thing for render users. I just noticed that I'm missing S here. And return this dot props users dot map and user. Return search user list item, and then pass that user object down to this component. Alright, so let's edit this components. Let's go to those items, and right here we're just gonna say for now this dot props post title, and right here I'll just say this dot props user dot username, because this object has that property. So if you check this post, it has the title here, and then for users we have username. So let's refresh the page. And start typing. And you can see all the titles and username appear in the drop down. Alright, cool. So let's style this. And let's go back to the original header file partial to see the markup. So I can see that I have a tag and an image tag, so I'm just going to take this and then go back to the list item component, paste that in, and instead of nghref, I'll just change it to post URL. And let's change this to class name instead of ng source. I'll add post avatar image. Let's check if it's the right property. Avatar URL. Okay, so avatar URL. And this is post title, but just single curlies. Alright, so that's good. Let's check that in our browser. Right, start typing Rails. Okay, cannot reference post is not defined. So let's go back. Okay, so this is my bad. This is this dot props post. This dot props dot post. This dot props dot post. Okay, this is getting too long, so I'm just going to reformat this. Refresh the page. Great, so we're rendering the list item. And you can see the React gave us this warning of each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key property. So let's add that. And currently I don't have any ID. I'm not getting any ID from the server, so I'm just gonna edit that real quick. So I know that it's in my app views, search, and autocomplete JSON.jbuilder. So I'll add JSON ID and then post ID and JSON ID and user.id. Okay, so let's go back to the component, and when I render this list item, I'll add a key property, and then now it's gonna get past this post ID. And let's do the same for user list item. Key equals user.id. Let's go back to the browser and start typing, and then we don't get that error. And the rendering is more efficient because we have that key. Alright, so that's cool. So let's do the same styling for user list item. Okay, let's go back to the header, and I'll grab this. Alright, so let's go back to the browser, refresh the page. And alright, so we're getting the same style in the people element as well. So one last thing, we have to hide this dropdown when the search field is empty. So let's do that in our container. Alright, so instead of rendering this search results all the time, I'll wrap this in a method call. So let's delete this. Actually, let's cut this out, and then I'll just say this render search results, and I create another method in this class. Render search results, and I add this if statement. So if the posts array and the users array are both empty, we're gonna just return null. So if this state dot posts dot length equal to 0 and this dot state dot users length equal to 0, just return. Otherwise, return that JSX. Paste that in. Alright, so if you refresh the page, you can see that the dropdown is hidden now. So if you start typing, and once you get once the array is not empty, it's going to render this dropdown. Perfect. So let's delete this Angular dropdown from our header. So I'm going to delete this. And refresh the page. Okay, so now this is a React component. So let's start typing. And it's getting if you see the bottom left of the browser, you can see that it's getting this right URL. So that's great. And one last thing that I notice is that I'm rendering all the elements in the array, and because I don't have many users and posts right now, it doesn't get many results, but it's going to get really long in the future. So I'm going to limit this to 3 elements. So let's go back to our list component, and instead of rendering everything, I'll just slice this, limit to 3, and do the same for the user. Let's go back to the browser. Alright, so the maximum would be 3, so that's good. And one last touch that I have to add is that when I search for something, and if the empty array, we're still going to get this header. I want to hide this when we don't have any posts to show. So let's go back to the list, and instead of always rendering this element, I'll wrap this in a method call. So let's copy this line, and then I'll just say this render post header heading. Okay, so let's do that. Post heading. So I add if statement. If this dot props dot posts dot length equal to 0, I'll just return null. Otherwise, I'll return that JSX. Okay, let's do the same for the people heading. So I'll grab this and say render user heading user heading. Oops. If this dot props dot users dot length equal to 0, it's gonna early return, and then otherwise return that JSX. Okay, so let's go back to the browser and start typing, and great, so we only get, we're hiding that heading when the array is empty. So let's delete that console.log and we finish up this screencast. Alright, so that's it for this episode, and if you want to see more React video, comment that in the comments below, and then don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks.